what are the 10 commandments for lead generation? Right? Again, look at this discretely from the larger blitzscaling perspective. Right? This is focused on lead gen as an activity, and look at it as one of the components for blitzscaling, like we did for traffic, so that you relate to it better. Okay, but please understand that what we did as 10 commandments for traffic, then what we do 10 commandments for lead gen, they at a blitzscaling level, they all have to get confused. Not confused, but confluenced. All right. Okay. With that said, we will jump into the strategy. All right. So typically, you come up with a goal, all right, for any lead gen activities, because it will then depend on the traffic that you're generating, okay, or rather the traffic that you will want to generate. With that, your typical goal setting, typically in a scenario is given as an example, right? You create X amount of leads, you create X amount of revenue, and then you go about creating, by making your cost of a digital asset. Now, in INR, a related outcome has been suggested through, where suppose you have 300 leads, right, coming from an X amount of traffic. That revenue will then result, say, into 50K or 50,000 INR. Now, if you get 10 customers where your digital assets is about 5,000 each, that is how you generate this revenue. But to get to 50K, what sort of lead gen should happen becomes always an X, and we'll come to those conversions in some time. Okay, because it will not be a direct rule. It doesn't mean that 10 leads will convert directly into an amount that is suggested through, right? That X amount will have further repercussions until it actually becomes a customer. Okay, so that misnomerism has to go away. It doesn't mean that X amount of traffic will convert X amount into customers. No, there will be certain conversion formulation. X will become some Y leads will become Z leads, and out of those Z leads, rather Z funnel, there'll be conversion. Okay, so that's how the typical funneling system works, and details will follow through. So then once you get into details, you'll understand what it means. Okay, now the typical strategy for lead gen activity works in maybe two formats or two concepts, if you will. There is a mode which is either hunting or farming. All right, what that means is that you have an outreach to people by virtue of your communication or the creativity that you generate, right, to find those leads that you're looking at, and by the virtue of creating traffic and so on and so forth, right? Then there's farming. That is your current set of customers that you have, or the current set of peripheral of influences that you have. You use them for further conversion to consume your assets. Okay, but when you go into hunting mode, right? And again, don't confuse this with traffic, right? So traffic is something that you're blasting out to, so that your persona of people who are out there comes about. Now you're trying to get the best out of that, whom you think could be your best potential customers, right? To do that, you give them a lead magnet of sorts, right? So always remember, lead magnet is your heart and soul of this, of lead generation activities, and the emotional connect and the communication with the creativity that you put in is the mantra behind this. Okay, so when you're putting your hunting cap in place for lead gen activities, your creativity is in creating that magnet. All right, and that's what will help you understand what to do at the right time. For farming, similar activity goes, but now you have a sphere of influence which you know where the conversion rate is highest, always, right? Hunting always takes its time because you don't know whom you're hitting out to. Why? Because you have a traffic from a anticipated persona which you might not truly have completely exercised. Your farming, on the other hand, is something you have in a circle of influence which you to some extent know has happened. Something has happened sometime or the other, whom you can influence to convert into a funnel. Okay. For example, a difference between the two will be you are hitting out of social media with your first campaign of ads, which then result into something, or maybe so it's say 10,000 people and seeing your ads and coming to a point, say a landing page, right? But from that landing page, maybe just 100 people convert and come to your next level, which could be giving them an ebook or something, right? Now, out of those people taking ebook, you don't know they are the right kind of people for converting into a customer for your larger course, maybe, right? E-course that you want to. So you will try and test. Then you will, you might retarget with something else. You again retarget with something else. So you do that circle until you come to a point. But whereas for farming, right, what happens is that you have a circle of influence. That means a circle of influence would mean in this case is that somebody has got some digital asset of yours, or some have converted into using a couple of times your ebook or something else that you've given, or some podcast they listen to you, and now they have been coming and visiting you repeatedly. So in that sense, they form a bit of a community for you. Right? Now, influencing them for you is much easier because you know what sort of creativity works with them, right? In terms of magnet and this and the other. So you do, because you're nurturing them, mind you, right? So you would do that. So in one, you are throwing seeds when the fruit grows, then you'll try to see what kind of color comes about. On the other hand, you've grown the tree, right? The several trees, and now the fruits which are coming out, you know the colors, right? Or the colors that will come out, you know already. So you're going to use it for the right purpose. Got it? So hunting and farming. Format. So what this means, right? 80% long form is used typically by educators or people who are selling the courses. 20% short form is entertainers, typically. So what this means is when you are typically, giving your digital assets in form of say e-course or maybe even an e-book, if you will, right? The larger format, about 80%, right, is where maybe it's upwards of 20 minutes or so, which typically attracts the right kind of people. That is what is being seen. Okay, because it takes the depth that people have to go through to understand what you're offering, or what they're listening to. If they stick around for 20 minutes, they know there is depth. There will be more depth when they go to the right place where they have to. Okay, so that's the purpose of that 80% for long form. 20% for short form for entertainment. So entertainment purposes, right? You give a short clip, you give maybe in TikTok you do a smaller clip which might just show what you're trying to anticipate to show for your say your graphic kind of some sort of an asset, which you might show by demonstrating a dance. Again, I'm going wild here, right? So by demonstrating a dance or showing a small animation clip which show that what you're trying to sell to them. Now, for whatever is used for entertainment, or to the extent that you might want to show a music clip, which you want to, for people to come to a landing page to sell some music elements out of that. Now, those are short forms, right? Typically, they work best for entertainment purposes, be whatever the outcome that you want to. So it depends on what you're really selling as a digital assets. These things come into play, right? Typically seen, the long form is the one which works the best for all sort of assets that you're going to sell. But for respective ones, right, as I mentioned here, for education purposes, etc., the long form works the best, and 20% times the short term, the entertainment ones. So what do you do doing these elements, right? So type the 80% strategy and 20% techniques and tools. Okay, so remember the success formula that we mentioned. The success mantra for traffic was 80% of mindset, right, and 20%, rather 15% of conversion of using your external communication, right? How you connect with people using the mindset that you've created, and 20% of communication of the personas of people that you want to target, and then you put the kind of messaging through. So that's the messaging, to 20% messaging and 80% mindset. For the rest is all about the heavy lifting by the system, right? Now in this case, 80% is strategy. Okay, so now mindset was used in the traffic. Now you're using strategy, right? We discussed long form, we discussed short form. Now and 20% is the technique of doing that. So whatever tools you use will be the technique used. So now you see we're narrowing down. Whatever communication earlier, now we're talking about strategy. Uh, so the mindset is now converting into strategy. So strategy in such case of converting from one to the other, in typical cases, is a lead magnet. So what creativity and how you strategize putting that magnet, which converts into something else, is the level of thinking that is required, and hence the 80-20 rule, the Pareto rule, typically, right? So that's how this works. So the focus after goal settings and conceptually doing what you need to do, you go about doing the focus. The focus typically should be the to create, share, and connect. That's the rule here. Okay, what does that mean? Uh, there should be 30 messages or 30 communications or 30, so to speak, elements that could be visually seen or heard per day that will affect the audience. So you affect at least 30 people per day with your inputs. All right, that should be a typical goal. So focus is you create something which will be shared and will connect it with at least 30 people per day. All right. So in a month, you would have done 30 such things to make them into a close to a 100 number, right? In a month. Clear? So 30 per day, 100 per month by focusing on creating, sharing, and connecting. So target 30 a day. If 30 is done, in the next 60, next day, and so on and so forth. Because it will have a compounding effect, right? Hence, it's not a direct number of 90, it could become 100. Clear? Putting a 10% buffer in place of sorts. So goal setting, concept of hunting and farming, formats to be used, and then the focus. Clear? I hope it is clear because this is very important, right, guys? So if not, get the clarity done during our session that we discuss for our rice circles, right? But should not be difficult enough to understand. Now, the strategy leads, as I told you, right? The heart of this is all magnet, right? The creativity is all in creating and magnets. So what you typically do, right, is you give a discounted content if your digital asset consists of some content. You give discounted memberships for a platform that you've created or series of applications or services that you want to give them for a certain period of time. So those come at a free or discounted pricing, right? Or you give them an early bird if you want to test a product with them like an MVP, or you want to test or get some feedbacks from people, right? You give them something free of cost which they can use at par, and then when they return they get at a discount price. So these are typically rough uh, thought processes for doing certain assets which can fit in most of the places. Okay, but depending on the assets, it really gets it can go wild because it's all about what you strategize and think and get it through, right? So what you put in traffic out there should be start as a genesis here, and that influences that elements also. Okay, so content plays an important role what you give, and again, to give you an example, if there's a course that you're selling, an e-course, which is an online course for something, you might want to give them free content, maybe like the first lecture free, which is typically a lead magnet of sorts, right? And then, or your trial course, if you will, or give them a membership for a certain period of time. They can finish it good, otherwise after that you start charging them, or you get them to a membership where you're doing practical training of sorts, where you're teaching them in video live, how to do certain, say, yoga asanas or something like that. And then early bird, right? Typically, if you have maybe the second course coming into play, you give them an early bird to try and test it out. Could be this, yoga series or whatever that is, and that results into your conversion. So we discussed this during the funnel, if you remember, right? Where we discussed that there would be a lead magnet and a tripwire and the concepts for those, and so those details. We'll go through it again once more so you understand, you have a better understanding. But this is what this means. So emphasis on magnet plays a very important role. There should be some emotional connect for the digital asset you have. Right? With that, know your tools. So the tools, as I told you, right, then become formulation for your 20% of activity, the Pareto rule we discussed earlier. So attract.io, right, for ebook creation, for example, free of cost. Then you have a convert kit for creating landing pages and email sequences, and most of it is free, mind you. You can start using it much before you start paying, right? It doesn't come at a very expensive cost. Uh, the feedback, so the VIP, the VIP Facebook, right? So you can set up quotes, etc. Right? You might be already a part of it, again free of cost. So these things can be set up much ahead in time until you start paying for extraneous tools, right? So this is your initial generation. Then Buzzsprout for podcasting activities and YouTube for video. So most of this is free. So these tools are for your social elements, and you create your magnets out of these things. While you've done it for your traffic, you've chosen your sources for putting a traffic in place. For your lead gen, you should do these things, right? The landing pages, the Facebook groups have to do what, and ebook creation for providing a free magnet, etc., etc. Okay, just a minute. Okay, with that said, you will now we'll jump into the next session of 10 Commandments. Give me a minute. Okay, so continuing with the next, should be next 7 of those. Okay, yeah, the 7 of those. Sorry. So what we have is the storytelling technique. Okay, everybody is a storyteller at the end of the day. That's the genesis of everything in the world, right? People, when they meet somebody, they talk about some things, right? With the relevant lot that they know, right? You might always think that I am not a storyteller. I am more of an introvert. I cannot talk too much, even to new people. No, right? Even if you're an introvert, you talk to somebody out there, right? When you talk to them something, okay? But when you talk to them, because you're comfortable talking to them, you are more free to think as the way you want to think and get it going, right? So if you start talking with such people and giving a story out of this, whatever you're creating as a digital asset, that becomes a repetitive activity for you. And then take it to the next person out there. You already will become a storyteller. And if you cannot communicate and you are afraid of communication and you're not a technology guy, please do become that, because without that, these things will not work. Now, the very purpose that you join this course, I'm assuming these you would know already, right? This need to be known. So technology, communication are basics for this, and storytelling becomes an offshoot of these elements. Okay, but what I just told you is, if you're not a storyteller, a your wife, your children, your best friend, or your other friend, start storytelling there, get comfortable what you speak repeatedly, and then go about narrating those stories somewhere else as well, so that you then are comfortable, and just once you start opening your ground with the others, you already become a storyteller. So storytelling in this case would mean your magnet that you're passing through the script that you're written through. And when you come face to face, either through coaching activities or through webinar activities, you are very comfortable talking at the same story out. That is the very purpose behind storytelling technique. So use a relevant format, right? Now, any format could be given, but since it gets into fictional mode, if you remember, we did the ebook in the Rise 2. The non-fiction had a particular tail to it and a structure to it. Similarly, and non-fiction, I gave you a tentative structure. You pick and choose which one you want to take. It can work here as well. All right, and that becomes a story. Give it just a relevance from a digital asset perspective, and that becomes your key story. And if that becomes your story, which you can tell very easily to your close knit people that you are comfortable with, and then talk about it so many times that it's so reputable that anybody new comes over, it's like an elevator pitch for you, right? Because you will use it in your webinar, etc. Because when we talk about webinar scaling, these are important activities, right? But you should have a story for each of your elements of activities. Okay. With that, I have laid emphasis enough. Storytelling is an important element and will be used repeatedly. And suppose you're a podcaster, you will have to become a podcaster sometime. So you will need to know these things very well. Okay. Let's jump to the next one. So the media setup. Okay. This I will not spend too much time, but media setup is all possible media elements, even if the ones which are not talked about here. The only important ones are talked about here, which is your video, audio, and the visuals. Visuals in this case, the graphics, right? Based on your niche. So your niche can go wild on this, right? Uh, though video covers the whole gamut of videos and audio covers the whole gamut of audios, your graphics and your readable stuff, if you will, or your readability stuff that exists out there has encompasses the visuals element of things, but a multitude, a combination of these things is what needs to get to the media setup level, right? Which you might do in any case while you get into creating a digital assets. Well, typically would be a culmination of video, audio, and your graphics, right? These three are the generalized ones, but you can go wild, right? You can start using gaming, you can start using the other elements out there to get to a point where you pass on the right communication that you want to. Okay, so but these three are the basics. Then the emotional connection. I told you this is very important, right? Uh, the emotional connection, if you don't have, typically people don't get into entrusting you enough for whatever offerings that you have, right? In your virtue of providing whatever you are going through various media to do that. But the emotional connect typically we've seen helpful, okay, personally also, is that you should join, you should make it uh, kind of your agenda for next, I would say at least for 2 months, to join a group a day, right? Sorry, 10 groups a day, uh, and 10 different groups on different platforms a day, if you will, and do an interaction with them. So, for example, if you choose FB and you join some 10 groups, right? You also have to interact with them. That means send at least a message out to a message that you have received, so that people start seeing you or see your name repeatedly or see your photograph there. Things like that. LinkedIn, maybe you do the same thing. Respond to a message to somebody who's written a good article so that you have some dialogue. So it's a potential kind of customer for you at a future, right? A funneled customer, if you will, once you know or get to know the person better. So once you do this, so imagine you will be part of, say, roughly 300 groups in a month, maybe 600 groups in a matter of 2 months, right? Then once you start interacting using those 600 groups a day, you have messaging to be done. But you can repeat those messages. One message can be sent to across. You can send one blog or a response to a blog throughout, saying that hey, this is what I did, and send it out throughout, right? So the best way is seen as put 30 meaningful comments a day, right? In any of your 600 groups. So if you start with 30, by end of the week you would have finished 600. It's one of those things. Okay. So work like this. Put hashtags, put likes, whatever, right? So that people are aware of you being socially available. And so when you send the real stuff out, right, for your lead activity or your lead generation activities or your traffic activities, people are familiar with the name and they might, so to speak, sometimes do blind clicking, right? Instead of knowing where is it coming from, right? From there. So, and once, as I told you, right, once you're part of the 30 groups, you're responding to certain messages, somebody will interact with you somewhere or the other. So you do that. Now, this is emotional connect, takes its time. Any emotional element will do, right? But you will have to put that time because it's meaningful when you start sending your final drafts of traffic and other activities. If you've not started it already, and these things have not been done before, okay, this is for that. If you're a pro, you're a master is a different story as a category, right? If you're a novice and you want to blitzscale, you would have come to a point where you have certain elements, but this is required for getting to the next level. Okay, so keep that in mind, and with that, let's move to the next one. Application setup. This is all about system setup. Okay, so we will go through it once more, right? We did something as an RFM, we did something in BARC in the traffic activities. Some of those elements will be used here using the tools we just discussed, right? And then we'll integrate them so that whatever you do now here will start into that automation mode now on. With that said, there could be a second one. We can get into the application setup zone. Give me a minute. So some of those elements will be used in this and in the lead gen activities. But what you need to know is the most important thing in this is the lead magnet. All right, so keep that in mind when you're setting up your systems for lead gen activities. The system setup remains the same. And now please understand, now if you remember in my Rise 1, Rise 2, something was mentioned, right? Something will be recurrently mentioned because so that you get very familiarized with these systems, because newer systems will not help your purpose, right? Because you'll get even more overwhelmed or confused if you're starting a journey. Okay, even for pros it gets difficult, right? If something is completely new, because they'll have to go through the journey again. So that's why from Rise 1, certain systems are being mentioned and we start maturing over a period of time so that you get to that point of blitzscaling. Okay. With that said, so the current systems will remain, the BARP system remains, but it will get now focused when we discuss now the automation will be from a lead gen perspective. That means the traffic that has come through, are you converting into leads, right? The RFM system, same story. If you remember, there was a whole funnel shown with social media, etc. And what we covered was the left portion of RFM system. Now we'll talk about what happens during the lead capture mode. Again, this will pure play require magnets. So magnets are the lead magnets are the only one which will convert into lead capture automatically. Okay, so that is where you will have to put your mindset. We mentioned 80% and 20%. So 80% is what you create as a magnet. 20% is what systems are going to do. Clear? In earlier times, if you remember, traffic was all about mindset, 80%. 15% was all about the conversion of, the usage of respective elements so that you can, the creativity that is going into it gets converted using the tools. That is how it was. Here we now do the systems of whatever you use as 80% will go into your creativity of magnets, right? That is your strategy. And then 20% is the tools. Okay, so execution will be done by the tools once you feed the right magnet and the right communication in place. Clear? Okay, so and the system setup typically would mean, and we discussed those points earlier, the same say pixels from Facebook, the Facebook pixels come into play. Your click funnel related landing pages will have the details. Then you'll have the convert kit, right? Where you've created, your click funnels are using for sales funnel, but your convert kit is using the email sequences, etc. And getting people to the point that you eventually want them to be the virtue of those sequences. Click Magic passes it's like a pixel, right? A Facebook pixel, which will track it through completely to the point where you want it to, and you know exactly what the life in a day of that particular individual is who's consuming your digital asset is. So same goes for the other social media elements. So system setup plays that kind of a role. Okay. And then I think if you follow the lead gen challenge, which will come at the end of the session, I think you should be good to put all this into practice, right? So then we'll discuss the next steps. Okay, the next steps are important because there's a whole 90-day and the 180 days. The creation of funnel, right? Because now lead again should not be seen as a standalone that you achieve wherewithal once you do the lead conversions. It's the funnel conversion which then proliferates, remember? So all this we are doing to come to a point where the funnel plays an important role. Okay, set up all basic systems, the mindset thinking, the creativity, the conversion, etc. So just to reiterate so that you don't get confused, traffic was all about what mindset you're using and communicating, all right? And automatically using systems to do that, the internal and external communication, if you will. The current lead magnets will help you convert those traffic elements by using whatever we just discussed. And then, and of course, the tools will help you do that. And then, once that has happened, your leads, what you do in your in your funnels, is what will really convert into an acquisition of a customer. Okay. It sounds like a long thing, but once you start getting into the cycles of doing this, it will become a piece of cake for you. Okay. With that, let's jump to the next lecture, and I will see you there.